Hello, everybody. I'm Candid, Frank Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on CFL Talk, joining me is David Morassutti. David, boy, oh boy, every time we talk about something, it ends up becoming the big story of the week.
It's like we have a crystal ball or something. We gotta get our lovely producer to do like a crystal ball segment.
No kidding, because another week where we have a conversation about something and then it becomes an issue. I was mentioning last week, and we were talking last week about Vernon Adams not being as heroic as he's been, at least in 2019, and sure enough, that problem is solved.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, there was he's had his fair share of comeback wins. We've seen
Absolutely.
it, as you said, Frank. I think what was most impressive about this is he had an injury. His team was down 17-3, early. So people are just like, oh, I mean, and we know Hamilton. Once they
Yep.
get a lead, it is very hard.
Great defense.
Great defense. It was very hard to get points on them. So not only was overcoming the injury big, but putting up 17 points in the fourth quarter on Hamilton, that's an accomplishment all in itself for Montreal and for Vernon Adams.
It sure is. It absolutely is. And Vernon Adams has been the kind of player that, when he's out there, he is dominant. He in 19 he came very close. I think he deserves some MOP consideration. I know he didn't have a full season, like other candidates for that award. But he came up with some amazing finishes, and those things count, towards the reliability and the importance of a quarterback. If a quarterback can make big plays, there's a guy down south named Brady. The reason that he is, the GOAT is because he's pulled victories out of losses repeatedly.
Yeah. I mean, I think some people try kind of misinterpret a quarterback's play based on how many yards they throw and all those things.
Yeah.
Vernon Adams had 2 interceptions in this game. Those are things you don't want to see from a quarterback. But it's the times of those interceptions, and it's how you respond to the turnovers. And he responded as you would like to see him respond, which is you lead a fourth quarter comeback and you bring it and you give your team a chance in overtime. And that I think is the most impressive part, because it wasn't a perfect game from Vernon Adams. I have seen the guy you mentioned, Tom Brady, not have perfect games, but do enough to make his team win. And that's what you want in a quarterback. I think every coach would rather have a guy who does the plays when it matters than a guy that's just going to put up a ton of yards and those things. I think the coaches prefer to get the guys that are going to make the plays at the right times, because that's what it takes to win in football.
Absolutely. And Mazzoli was he was 23 of 33, 69.7%, 223 yards. Problem was that the points didn't come for him. No TDs, but no interceptions either. And a lot of people in Hamilton are very dissatisfied with his game. I don't understand it. I get it. We said about Vernon Adams, he hasn't been that fantastic up until this week. Hasn't made the big plays. Mazzoli deserves a little time too. I mean, the guy just came back from an injury, and sometimes I wonder about fans and how they ride a quarterback so quickly. I mean, from one week to the next. Goat to goat. They go from goat to goat.
Mazzoli has been an interesting case because Yeah, he has not looked anything like he did in 2018. 2019, he had 9 touchdowns and 7 interceptions before suffering that injury. He wasn't exactly playing, mistake-free football. It's not the ratio. You like to see more of a 2-to-1 ratio or 3-to-1 ratio when it comes to touchdowns and interceptions. This is I think what happened here is Hamilton went into the year saying we have the best 1-2 punch in the league between Mazzoli and Evans.
Hey, I said it too.
Yeah,
So what?
and I agreed with that too. But then Mazzoli goes down. Well, actually, Mazzoli struggles. Then Dane Evans comes in. Mazzoli is, dinged up with I think his a shoulder injury. Dane Evans looks really good. He's getting the team wins. Their defense is really good, and right now with Evans out, it is on Mazzoli to pick up the slack. And there's just so much pressure on Hamilton this year because they're hosting the Grey Cup. They want to be there. And right
Mm.
now, they're putting themselves in a position where I can't see them there right now. Even as good as their defense is, Frank, we have seen great defenses, but when you're not able to put up the offense to back it up, there's only, as I said with Ottawa, there's only so much a good defense can do until your offensive struggles break the back of your defense.
The season thus far has not been really controlled by any team in the division. Yes,
No.
Hamilton has a great record. It's a good record, and for the East Division, when it usually the usual East Division situation where 500 will get you, will get you to the top of the heap. Um, this year, a little less than other years because the crossover games aren't as many this year. So the opportunity for the Western teams to beat on the Eastern teams has been lessened a little bit. And not only that, there have been a lot of weaknesses in the Western Division, and there's a lot of after last week, you can really say that all 4 Eastern teams don't look bad. I don't mean that they don't look bad. Hamilton looked really good. Toronto looked really good. Montreal looks really good. But Ottawa after last week don't look so bad. And we've seen, Calgary that looked terrible not look so bad either. And then you've got Edmonton. So, and the other 3, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, and BC have looked really good. BC not so much recently. So, I think both divisions are up for grabs. I believe that I don't think there's we're at the halfway point of the season. At every halfway point of the season, the past few years, I promise you, I'm going to get to my point. The point is that the Western Division teams, by the time we reach this point, the halfway point of the season, we're already wondering which Eastern team's not going to make the playoffs beyond the 4th place finisher. In other words, we're talking, we're talking the Western team crossing over. I don't know if this year so far that isn't the case. If that happens, it's going to be late.
Well, and I think what this week showed me is that the West is a lot more open than I think people are giving it credit for. Like,
Yep.
look, Winnipeg, I think
Yeah, they're
they have,
running away.
they have to go on some like they have to go on what happened last year, 2 years ago, 2019, to lose that division. They're 7-1. They're in a really comfortable position. Saskatchewan started to separate themselves a little bit, but that loss to Calgary, I think, kind of it opens the door a little bit because
Absolutely.
BC, if they had won that game against Saskatchewan, they would have been in first. They would have been in second place. I think second and third in the West is up for grabs. And when you talk about the crossover, Montreal has to look behind themselves because Calgary can still make things interesting there. Ottawa, now that they've sort of gotten a little bit of momentum, I mean, they got to beat a team not named Edmonton right now, but they got a young, exciting quarterback right now that showed, hey, maybe maybe Frank and David were right that maybe you got to go go with something a little different there. They're this week in the I say this might be one of the more pivotal weeks in terms of determining where teams are in the CFL because you look at the games that are being played and even
Oh
Thanksgiving
my
coming up.
goodness. Like we did jump to the 3rd game first. So I
Yes.
apologize folks for doing that. But we had to mention this game. I think this was You
This
know,
was the most important game.
because because the first game of the week was on Tuesday, it was so long ago, we forgot how good that game was
Yeah.
too.
That game had so much intrigue going into it because, you know, Trevor Harris is still down.
Absolutely.
Ottawa was playing a guy who's never played in the CFL, and it was the I would say from start to finish probably the more entertaining game when you
Yeah,
look at all the things.
start to finish. The other game that we just talked about,
Yeah,
it took it at the end, it started to get, but it was a
yeah,
comeback, right?
exactly.
Montreal made a comeback. So the game looked like you said, earlier, you said, it looked like it was out of reach. In fact, Matthew Schultz came in, Vernon Adams got hurt his ankle, looked like he was done for
The game.
done for the game. He comes back in. You look at, I guess, we'll just hop all over the place today. So we were
Yeah.
talking about Edmonton and Ottawa. Caleb Evans showed us a little bit. He looked a lot like Vernon Adams. Some of the stuff that he was doing. Rolling out and making great passes and really making the big plays. And this is a kid who hasn't played football in 2 years.
Yeah, that's probably the most incredible part with all these guys that are coming in is that they haven't like when we seen them play. Maybe some of them had a little bit of a time in the NFL. Maybe they're
Yeah.
coming out of college if they were one of the few that actually got to play college football last year. But for the most part, yeah, Caleb Evans, from what I remember, did not play football in 2020.
No, he didn't.
He came from out of Louisiana Monroe. There was someone I should have taken a note of this. There's someone on Twitter that was saying, I I was saying that Caleb Evans is a guy to keep your eye on. And we talked about, Marcel Desjardins needs to start looking for a quarterback. Well, maybe he had one and the coaching staff didn't feel he was ready to play. Well, if you're an Ottawa Redblacks fan, you're saying I want Caleb Evans to be starting until he can't start anymore.
Well, you want the guy starting who won the last game for sure.
Exactly.
And
3
it and sorry,
Go ahead.
Ottawa hadn't won a game at home in 2 years. 3
Exactly.
years, 3 years, in fact.
Yes. That's how bad it was in 2019 for them.
Yes. So, they're really happy that they got a win at home. That poor guy with the chainsaw, I think his chainsaw seized up, the guy that cuts the cookies for the TDs. His chainsaw, he had to oil it a few times before he can cut the cookie for that touchdown.
What impressed me the most about Caleb Evans is, and I'm gonna echo what you said about Vernon Adams. Vernon Adams is not a guy I expect to throw 30 times a game, but you want him to make the right plays at the right time. Not only did Caleb Evans not throw an interception, we always bring that up because I feel like a guy who comes in fresh off, not a lot of preparation, doesn't throw an interception. That's pretty good. Taking advantage of great field position because Edmonton, Taylor Cornelius had 2 interceptions himself. He took advantage of that, and there was plays where he went down the field and you just went, wow,
Absolutely.
because
And to your point, the whole thing is, just like you have to establish run, an offense has to establish run so that they can pass. A quarterback that is fleet of foot has to establish the pass if his running is going to be worthwhile, because if he runs first and then passes, he's going to get clobbered. So yeah, so it's the flip of the for the quarterback. They have to establish the pass so that a guy like him can run and cause problems, because as soon as the pressure comes off a quarterback like Caleb and Vernon Adams and Dane Evans, and these quarterbacks, when they don't have the pressure on them, you allow them the freedom to pass and to run around to make the pass, they can do a lot of damage.
they can, and he showed that he's not afraid to run, and he made some big run. He had the 17-yard run. He carried the ball 7 times for 59. I was surprised that Ottawa rushed the ball 14 times with Timothy Flanders. I said Ottawa didn't have much of a running game. Flanders only averaged 3.2 yards a carry. That's not great. You want to be up closer to the 5 range and as a CFL back. But having, Caleb Evans showing that he can be that dual threat guy, I think will
Mhm.
open up a little bit more for him. And then obviously, they had a little bit of trickery there with Ryan Davis throwing.
Oh, off the hop at the beginning.
Yeah,
That was like a second play, wasn't it? Or was it the first play? Was it first or second play? It was early.
you
First
want to
play.
do that because you want to keep the defense on their toes, especially if they feel like that they can rush and try to pressure a young quarterback. How do you take some pressure off? Let's throw a trick play in there right off the hop to make
Make them
the defense
think.
make them think about it.
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about, whether it's offense, whether it's quarterback, you have to eliminate predictability. That's the key to football. As soon as you become predictable in football, defenses collapse, offenses collapse, quarterbacks collapse, receivers collapse. There has to be a lack of predictability. It is the most important thing in a team sport like football that is over scrutinized post game, pre game. Statistically and habits and patterns, football, it's all about that. That's what you're trying to figure out. What might that team throw at us? And you have to know. And if you can predict what the opposition is going to do, you're going to have them under your thumb.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I credit Ottawa for they had the right game plan for a young guy coming in, not having the preparation because not having the amount of preparation because last week we were like, they're in a real pickle right now because they have no quarterback.
Absolutely.
Now it's just funny how the script kind of flips there for Ottawa.
Well, that's what happens when you find a young quarterback, that the team day one can't figure out. But here's the problem. You know, there are a lot of quarterbacks like Caleb Evans that have had a great first game. Some have even had a great second game. But then what happens sometimes to these quarterbacks that have a good showing first time out? The book comes out on them. So it's very important that La Police and company insulate this kid so that they continue his growth. And again, I use this term all the time now in this past 5 minutes, remove his predictability. So the less predictable he is, the more difficulty defenses will have in stymieing his offense. So, but he's with a great coach. La Police is a great quarterback coach. They've got a pretty good defense in Ottawa. So, it hasn't been as good as it's been in the past, but I think it can be good. And, if you get a quarterback that can get you a couple of touchdowns, not throw any interceptions. I mean, Caleb Evans leads the Ottawa Redblacks in the past 3 years in TD passes with 3 in one game. The most
That's
before was 2 by a quarterback.
that's the part. The 3 touchdown passes, I think, is what the most impressive part because they needed them. Edmonton was starting to make things a little interesting at late there, and they needed a touchdown, and he was able to get it. That's what's impressive is that you can have a great start because the defense can make adjustments. It's how do you respond late in the game when there's a little bit of pressure to make sure that you don't let up. I think that's what we saw.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that when you look at the receiving core for Ottawa, you have RJ Harris with 80 yards, Ryan Davis with 67 receiving yards, Kenny Stafford, released by, just so happens, the team on the other side. He had 44. Coombs 21, Flanders 16. I'm mentioning all these numbers because this is the beauty of a quarterback that can win. Those stats don't scream that this was a team that on passing won. And then when you look at their rushing, he led the team in rushing. You mentioned earlier that Flanders only ran for 45 yards. And this is, the effectiveness of the positive plays that you make at the right time. And that's the other thing, that when we talk about Vernon Adams, he doesn't look that, like, he doesn't dominate a game, but he just takes the game over when he needs to take it over. And that's what Caleb showed with those 3 touchdown passes.
Yeah, and Kenny Stafford was the recipient of one of those passes. Like, he only had 2 receptions in the game, but
Yeah.
one of them was for a touchdown. And you're looking on the other side with Edmonton, and I hate to say it, but Darrell Walker, there was a lot of hype of him
Oh,
coming back,
my goodness. Yes.
and he does not have a 100-yard game. Now, part of that is because Greg Ellison has been so good, but Darrell Walker was supposed to be the guy in that receiving core, or at least top 2, and he has not looked like the Darrell Walker even from when he was with the Argonauts. At least he was putting up
He
yards
had
and making
31
plays.
yards in one pass,
Yeah.
and he only got 31 in total.
Yeah. Like that if you're Edmonton right now, that's a little concerning because yes, it's good that Greg Ellison's doing well. It's good that James Wilder Jr. is doing well. But who's stepping up behind them? And I think Darrell Walker is in a position again where he's being misused in the offense. I said he was being misused in Toronto. I think it's even worse now in Edmonton.
And can we on a like just the point I was making about making a lot of out of very little, and that's what makes quarterbacks great. Cornelius Taylor, all right, 22 of 31, 71%, 334 yards passing. You would think that would be a good stat, right? He threw 3 TDs too.
Yeah.
Problem is he threw 3 interceptions as well. And we talked about this, and this is one of the things that I'm beginning to to really think is really important. That touchdown to interception ratio is imperative. It is a real giveaway to a quarterback that can win and one that struggles.
And not only that, first play of their drive, Greg Ellison gets stripped for a fumble.
Yes.
You know, it's they only had 3 turnovers, but it's the turnovers that come at the times you don't want them to come because Ottawa scored on their first drive of the game. Then they get the ball back because Edmonton turns the ball over, and then they take a 14-0 lead, which is like, that 5 minutes into the game they were up 14-0. You know, that changes the psyche of your team a little bit. And if I'm going to be a little critical of Edmonton here, why isn't Dakota Prukop, a guy who's been in the CFL a little bit
He threw
longer?
2 passes.
He threw 2 passes. Why is he not being given more of an opportunity when the other guy hasn't? Yes, he threw for a lot of yards, but it's easy to throw for a lot of yards when you're and the touchdowns when your team is out of it was out of it for the most of the game.
And Dakota Prukop is a big play quarterback. I'm going to
You,
say that. He's a big play quarterback downfield. So,
I would just if you're Edmonton right now is losing a lot of they're last in the West.
mhm,
They're
they
losing
are.
it right now, and
They are.
they might think that Trevor Harris is going to come back soon. Maybe he is, but you lose the next game. You're banking on Calgary and BC to keep losing to give yourself any chance of making the playoffs. And if they don't make the playoffs, boy, will there be changes in Edmonton. And I might start right at the top because
It doesn't help either that a lot of teams aren't playing well because it's like a missed opportunity, right?
it is very much so. Who would have thought that Calgary would be under 500?
Yeah.
Who would have thought that BC, would overtake both Calgary and Edmonton? You know, the East is still open for that one crossover if a West team wants it potentially. If Montreal, I mean Montreal got that much needed win. If Montreal lost, I actually think if Montreal had lost, they wouldn't have been in the crossover. There would have been a crossover in effect right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I'm Edmonton, you do not have a lot of time to get yourself
No.
back into it. And this week, they are playing Winnipeg. Guess what?
Yeah.
Guess what? Most people are going to chalk that up as an automatic loss. I guarantee when the CFL does their predictions, every writer is going to write off Edmonton. And
Yeah.
you know what the betting line is set at? Plus 14. So they're predicting Winnipeg to win by 2 touchdowns. That is
Jeez.
in the gambling world, that's astronomical when, uh, you know, That's how far. That's how much people think of Edmonton right now.
And then, of course, that's a tempting little bet for somebody to pick up Edmonton with that spread,
Yes.
right? So there are people hoping, okay, Edmonton, look bad, look bad, look bad, look bad. Now make something
Oh, you
happen
talking to me?
during
Are
the
you
game.
talking? Okay, I'm just gonna.
Because who doesn't like a dark horse, especially with the return that you get? I'm not a gambler, so I'm just talking like I think I know what I'm talking about. The truth is, I don't have a clue. But you know what? You're right about, it's disappointing as far as Edmonton's concerned because this is an organization and a team that just won the Grey Cup a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
One of the Riley's last years. They won with the guy that's consultant on defense with Toronto. That there's word. I saw a comment from an Edmonton broadcaster where he made the comment. He said, people wouldn't feel so bad if Chris Jones came back.
I'm saying that the Toronto. No, he has an option to come back to Toronto, but we already know that he's got his eyes on
Somewhere else.
somewhere in the CFL. It might be,
Absolutely.
and you know, we'll see. I mean, do Edmonton fans have a short memory? Do they forget that he left them to go to Saskatchewan?
But they also must remember at the same time what you can't leave behind there is that they won the Grey Cup before he left.
Yep. And
I mean, he can leave again and win the Grey Cup again and then leave. That's fine. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I'm sure that if we ask fans honestly, if your team, like this is the thing about people talk about this, right? For example, in baseball, Leaf fans, all these teams that don't win championships, would you be willing to lose terribly for 5 years in a row if in 5 years you would win the Stanley Cup or you would win the Grey Cup? And you're like, you know what I mean? Like, uh, winning the championship is really all everybody wants, David. That's the thing that stirs the drink. It's great. The only reason it's great when teams play well every year is because they get another kick at the can. But
yeah,
it's about getting the can to where you want it to be. That's the issue. And there are 8 other teams in the CFL that are talking about the same thing.
it's not to forget what the expectation Edmonton initially had
Oh,
was
oh,
Scott Milanovic was going to be was going to be our coach,
yes.
working with Trevor Harris. You know that was what the expectation was. Then it's Jamie Elizondo. Things have been looking really shaky there. Trevor Harris is down, and then yes, you see Chris Jones come back to the CFL, and I would, if things are not rosy in Edmonton, you're thinking maybe there's a potential there, and I think you're not too far off when you mention Chris Jones wants to be back coaching, but he
You know,
wants to
there's
be a head coach. We
there's
already know that.
there's a couple of openings, possibilities. Calgary, I think that's a no brainer. There's nothing happening there. The coach and the GM, they're really good. Yes, there might be an issue with their starting quarterback. We've seen a little bit of animosity between, the head coach Dickinson and of course Bo Levi Mitchell. Um, I guess, well, we'll just scatter anyway. The word that Bo Levi Mitchell put out there was, "I played terrible. I went out because I had to go out if I'm a team player."
And he
So
said he wasn't feeling at his best with
right,
his injury.
right. So when we look at the season this year in the Canadian Football League, it is as unpredictable as it possibly could be, except for Winnipeg. Unless you're a believer that a team that wins the Grey Cup struggles the next year. So if you believe that, then Winnipeg's a surprise too.
And yeah, very much so. And I think this year shows that maybe there is really an opening for a lot of teams.
Yeah.
Maybe next year when maybe things are a little more normal in some cases, or things kind of turn around a bit. I think there's some teams that sees themselves and say, "Hey, all we got to do is we got to beat Winnipeg because we feel
Yep.
the other teams are just not there yet."
Yep. Then you start building a team that can beat Winnipeg.
Yes.
And then the headache becomes you got to beat other teams to get there. So, it's a great situation. The Canadian Football League lost a season. A lot of players have moved. Um, players have gotten older. Have they? Because they haven't played. Are they really older? There's so many changes that have happened, and we're starting to see some trends develop. I think this year will be this to your conversation, to what you were saying. This year will be the beginning of the trend that will predict next year. Because last year there's no basis of anything other than the fact that Winnipeg won the Grey Cup the year before, that Hamilton was there. Montreal showed that they could improve. BC showed they could improve. People were questioning, after that season, Calgary, will they be able to bounce back? Saskatchewan led the Western Division, but Winnipeg won the Western Division. It was going to be a two-horse battle. All these things that we thought were going to happen this year are kind of happening. But the neat thing is, as far as this year is concerned, anybody can win the Grey Cup, even with a dominant team like Winnipeg, because quite frankly, the greatest thing in sport is the massive favorite has a very large burden. When a team is a massive favorite, especially in the Canadian Football League, we have seen Grey Cups won by underdogs left and right, left and right. So to your point, I agree with you 1,000%. This season's not as predictable as people might think.
I think the Toronto Argonauts kind of started that trend in 2017 when they beat
Yep,
Calgary. And then Calgary kind of regained their footing a bit when they beat
got
Ottawa,
angry and won.
got angry and won. And then I think Hamilton brought that trend back when they were the overwhelming favorites to win. I think
Yes.
they were the overwhelming favorites. And Winnipeg's like, nah, we think we found the right foundation. And what impresses me most about Winnipeg is that they took that and they said, we can sustain that. And we're going to sustain that.
Yeah,
And
they got a good team there. And
they
not
did.
just team, I mean a management team too. A
Exactly.
head coach that knows what he wants, and a GM that knows what to give the coach.
Just a thing, two things about that before we move on.
Well, keep going.
Imagine how different things would have been because I've thought about this, and I know the Argonauts had a contract for Zach Collaros
Yes.
ready to go,
Oh,
keep him around.
oh.
Then Jim Pop gets fired, and they trade him to Winnipeg.
First thing that pinball did.
Very first thing that they did, and I think if you're Winnipeg and you're a Winnipeg fan, you're you're saying thank you for that because
That's the Ricky Ray move.
I think so.
That was the Ricky Ray move. That's what happened. Like, and the thing is, Toronto fans didn't have a chance to be dissatisfied with Caleros.
No,
He wrote out his injury, got healthy, and the Argos traded Caleros. I really felt that was a mistake at the time. Well, it's easy to think it's a mistake
yeah.
now. Yeah, I thought it was a mistake at the time, only because Caleros was a winner. Were the issues with his injuries really? Is that why the Argos traded him?
I also think there was a bit of we want to do the right thing for Zach, and they weren't playing him, and I don't expected them to play him, and I think they want to do right by him and say we think you got a chance to play, we're going to give you that chance. I think maybe they thought they could circle back and get him back. I think there was a belief that there would have been that, but when Winnipeg won, I think he really liked how everything worked out there. That how do you leave a winning situation? You can't. It's so hard as a quarterback, especially a CFL quarterback. There aren't many CFL quarterbacks.
Oh, well, that's why I
Leave.
thought it was wrong for them to
Yeah.
trade him there. You don't. There aren't that many elite quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League at any given time.
No, and I think it says something that the only team that beat Winnipeg this year so far is Toronto. I find that quite
You think that
amusing.
was part of the deal, or?
I think Winnipeg maybe took a little bit of pain and say, hey, you know what, you gave us this opportunity, we might as well not totally rub it in your face. But
Yeah,
yeah,
well, they did a solid for Zach.
they did.
They definitely did.
And I think Zach appreciated that. But I know Zach had interest to stay in Toronto.
There is another reason why they might have traded him, David. They felt they might be asking more than they can afford.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
don't know what the contract would have been. I don't think I don't with Zach's injuries. I don't know if he would have been able to command a huge dollar amount, but I don't think it was going to be cheap either.
yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And then there's the risk reward thing, right? That
And
the team has
do,
the decision has to make.
and I think the management staff is like, do we want to roll the dice on someone with that injury problem when we need something a little more stable?
Well,
Which, funny enough, if we're going to talk about Toronto quickly,
no, go ahead.
stable isn't happening right now in terms of injuries with both their quarterbacks.
No, absolutely. So injuries have become a bit of a problem for them, which is the CFL trend over the past few years has been that quarterbacks get hurt. I just wonder if the Argos had in mind to go after Nichols as they ended up doing. If they get sent Caleros there, maybe they would, it would mean Nichols might become available, right? And they knew that maybe Nichols wanted to come. But then, they ended up getting the coach that they hired is a guy that was in Calgary. And then, all the crazy things that that all there's a little odor of uh-huh, you know what I mean, like Arbuckle goes to Ottawa, ends up in Toronto. Nichols comes to Toronto. Nichols ends up in Ottawa, where the head coach is from Winnipeg, where in Toronto where the new head coach is from Calgary. It's like it's amazing how the dance worked. And as of now, we know that the Argos won in that decision. They appear to have made the right decision with bringing Arbuckle in and sending Nichols on the way. Now, Nichols, as you know, we're while we talk about quarterbacks and talk about Winnipeg and how their season changed when Caleros started, Hamilton was the favorite in the Grey Cup because nobody really gave Caleros as much credit as he'd had at that point. He took the team. They won, I think it was 4 games in a row. Was it 3 games? No, 3 games in a row. I think they won with him. And the fourth game was the Grey Cup. He won those 3 games. Yeah, he had that great pass into the corner. Yeah, he looked really good. But Hamilton's still the favorite. Their defense will. And then that team, Edmonton, sorry, that team, that Winnipeg was a whole different team in the Grey Cup than they were before the Grey Cup. They deserved a lot of respect. Their defense was awesome. They had a pretty good offense, but it wasn't a shiny offense like it became under Caleros.
No, it was not, and it relied a lot on Andrew Harris as well.
Right. Wasn't really passing because Nichols wasn't known as a guy that threw the ball downfield that much. He could, he did, but it wasn't a reputation that he developed. He was basically, give me let's see what you give me and I'll take it. He is the guy that throws 2 passes for 12 yards. You know,
Yeah.
and Caleros isn't that guy. Caleros likes throwing into the corner. Caleros likes stretching the defense. And we've seen him do it this year. He's been amazing. And I can't see it happening to a nicer kid. This guy, I kind of, the irony, the irony is that Caleros came into Winnipeg as an injured quarterback who had a really tough career thus far. And who's he going in to replace? And eventually, who did he replace? Another quarterback who's had a hellacious, 5-6 years. So the irony to me is incredible. That with Winnipeg and Nichols leaving and Caleros being there, either one of them could have been healthy and won the Grey Cup.
Yeah. And I mean, if we want to talk about that game against BC,
Yes,
that I felt was a statement performance from Caleros because BC,
Riley.
we talk, my everyone, there was a lot of talk about Michael Riley. There was a lot of talk about that BC defense being very tough to play against. Zach Caleros, I think, had arguably his best game in a really long time. 28 28 completions. So he was 84% completion, 85 if you want to round it up. 417 yards,
Say that number again. 417.
and I think a big shout out to Kenny Lawler.
Yeah, no kidding. He made some
12 receptions on 14 targets for 205 yards.
absolutely.
I was trying to remember, and there have been quite a few. I was trying to remember the last time there was a 200-yard receiving game in the CFL.
And
I couldn't. I was just trying to think off the top of my head. I know SJ Green had one in Toronto. It's been a while. Uh, this is Kenny Lawler with that performance put himself into the league lead for 45 catches and 703 yards off that one game.
absolutely.
Um, that was the scary part because we know that Winnipeg's defense is really good, and Winnipeg's offense didn't give me any reason why to think they weren't good. They just added another level of yeah, you're gonna have to watch out for us because it seems like they're getting better every week.
Okay, you want to talk about receipt? You're right. Yeah, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I think no, I just like when I see this, it's just that's the part that's really that I think is impressive is that you think that they're already reached their ceiling, but then they're like, no, our ceiling is much higher than that.
I wanted to, and I don't want to forget this. I wanted to mention the name Eugene Lewis because you were talking about some great receiving by Lawler. Eugene Lewis and that tie, that lead touchdown that gave Montreal finally the lead. I don't know how he caught it. You
Mhm.
know, we're seeing a lot of great plays by CFL players this year. And thank goodness, because that's the part that makes watching the Canadian Football League so interesting is some of these receivers that we I don't think we forget, but it's nice to be reminded of the great receivers that are in the Canadian Football League. And Eugene Lewis making that reception running along the goal line was amazing. And that's what made that game so great is that there were great plays by the quarterback, but without really good receivers, that's the other thing, David. That when we talk about
Yeah,
statistics, can you get a receiver that can make that play? Eugene Lewis is the guy that makes that play when it needs to happen.
he is, and you need you need those guys because you need guys that can not only make the tough catches but make something out of nothing.
At
And
key times,
yeah,
at key times, we great receptions. That's why we love those receptions in the corner of the end zone.
oh, I mean, those are the toughest ones for a receiver because you can get pushed out of bounds very easily. You have to make sure you remain in bounds. Like there's those are I always like to see those types of plays because that's what the receivers work on the most. Those
Absolutely.
toe taps and a quarterback, all they got to do is they got to force the receivers to be, just force them into the toughest position to make the catch. And I give receivers a lot of credit for finding out ways to break through.
Can we diagnose a little bit of what happened with the Stampeders and Rough Riders? We mentioned Bo Levi Mitchell, but we haven't said word one about Fajardo. Um, he only threw an interception, no TD. There's that statistic that I like to draw attention to. This is probably um, one of the games where Fajardo did not look as good as he's looked in the past. I'm not saying he looked terrible, but it wasn't the Fajardo on the curve to greatness. He
No.
kind of leveled off a little bit with this game. Did you see anything in there that was trend worthy, or was it just the fact that Calgary's defense came to play? Because I
Calgary's
liked what they did.
Calgary's defense definitely came to play. I think Saskatchewan should be very satisfied in that Keon Schaefer Baker continues to trend up.
Oh my goodness.
He's been, I think, I think he's been the best story for Saskatchewan this season. And I think for Fajardo, there's pressure on him. He threw 44 times. That's not Cody Fajardo. He's not a guy that throws that much.
No, you're
And
right.
and to not get a touchdown out of that, I mean,
Oh,
again, credit the Calgary defense, because that's how you deal with a quarterback that might be putting up the yards or throwing so much. Fine, throw as many times as you want. We're just not going to allow you to get into the end zone.
yeah. I forget the defender's name for Calgary. Um, Gosh, I really feel bad. I don't remember, but he did a shortstop, the baseball shortstop in the hole catch when he knocked that ball down. That it looked like an easy reception. The defender that was actually on him, um, was
Mhm.
beat, and then he was horizontal and just tapped it with his hand. I said a long time ago that one of the great byproducts of the new rules when it comes to defensive backs and defenders is that they're going to have to get more athletic defensive players, and we're seeing that this year. And that play, and I feel bad I don't remember the kid's name, but what a play! And we're seeing more of those because the defensive players have to be more athletic today than they used to be.
And that's something that coaches really work on is, you know what? If we want you guys to make the plays, you got to be ready to jump those routes. It's football IQ in a lot of ways,
Oh, absolutely.
because if you have somebody that's able to cover you, and you can go out, because that's the one thing, you can't make that play unless you have someone backing you up, because if you miss, it's going the other way against you. So that I think, Calgary has always had really good defensive backs. They've always had hard to play against secondaries. Their pass rush has taken a bit of a hit. It's gotten better, but I think for Calgary, I think that's the important thing is, can we limit these guys to field goals? Because right now we're not scoring touchdowns ourselves. They only had 2 touchdowns in that game, which is very This season, as I said, has been very un-Calgary like, because you don't expect them to only have 2 touchdowns in a game. You don't expect
Absolutely.
Bo Levi Mitchell to throw the ball 25 times and 184 yards. That's not Bo Levi Mitchell. So I think, maybe Calgary's starting to realize, what, we got to take it upon ourselves to give him a little more help. Kadeem Carey has been a lot better. He had 78 yards on 11 carries. The average is there. Maybe they need to feed him a little bit more. Uh,
Absolutely.
but I think Calgary, they're starting to find ways to adjust, because they're not the Calgary of old anymore. They got to, Dickinson's got to mold them into something a little bit different if they want to be successful.
Well, Bo Levi Mitchell, and this is, I'm sorry, and please don't get mad at me, folks, but contracts have to be earned. You can sign a contract for what you did for the past few years, but you still got to play that way in the years that you're getting paid the kind of money that that kind of player deserves, right? And right now he isn't. And the coach Dickinson said, I need the Bo Levi Mitchell that I know to come and play the game that I know he can. I still believe in him, but he needs to play that kind of game. And he pulled himself out of the game because he wasn't doing what he needed to do. And it was an admission on his part that he's not, maybe hiding behind the fact that he was injured. I don't know. But the fact is, he took himself out because he wasn't doing the team any favors, and he said so.
I think that's some maturity on his part, but I don't. Yeah, the whether or not it's an injury part, I don't know if we're getting the full story there,
Right.
because I think
Goodness knows.
we don't know, and I don't think he's banged up. We can't we know that he's a little banged up. but at some point, you got to go with the guy that's going to give you the best chance to win. Right now, they still think that's Bo Levi Mitchell. Maybe this is a little bit of an admission that maybe going forward he might not be if he can't keep himself in the game in key moments.
Absolutely. We got a couple of minutes left, and we've had some crazy, like not crazy, so some scheduling that we're not big fans of. A Tuesday game, right? Last week was a great
Yep.
way to start the week. We forgot that game already. It was such a good game. And now, because we do this every Monday, and now on Wednesday the Argos play a midweek game, and they're the bookend. They play game 1 and game 5 in week 10. And they come back on Monday after Wednesday to play the Hamilton Tiger Cats on Thanksgiving Monday. And in between, Edmonton at Winnipeg, Calgary at Saskatchewan, Ottawa at Montreal. Um, Talk a little bit about those games. What game sticks out for you? I mean, the doubleheader for the Argos, that sticks out because those are going to be two key games and to be played in that, in 5 days. That's going to be
We
interesting to say the
complain about
least.
the Wednesday game, but then that's the reason why they're playing the Wednesday game is
Right.
because they're playing on Monday.
Absolutely.
I would have
After a week off, so it's not bad.
at this rate, maybe you should have had them play earlier because they were on a bye week, but that's also
Absolutely.
not fair to
They
Ottawa.
just about wiped out the bye week, right?
Yeah, exactly. Um, I think the game that really sticks out to me, if we're talking about the 3 games coming up, it's the rematch of Calgary, Saskatchewan. Can Saskatchewan bounce back
Yeah, they play
after
them 3 times in 4 weeks.
that's key. I think Winnipeg is going
That's gonna be a playout that's gonna be playout that has playoff implications, you're right.
it does. And I think that's the game. I mean, look, Ottawa has a chance with a win against Toronto to put themselves back into the conversation. But Calgary, I feel like by beating Saskatchewan again, it gives them a little belief that they can get themselves back into the West Division because BC has stumbled the last 2 games. And I think, if you're Saskatchewan, you don't want to give Calgary any momentum, considering
No.
they're playing them a few times now.
No, absolutely not, because BC's not playing too badly, and you've got Winnipeg. You figure, they're fighting for 2 playoff spots, right? There's 2 playoff spots. They can't depend on the crossover this year, and so it's going to be imperative that somebody, whoever wins that series, if you will, the best 2 out of 3, is going to have the momentum. They're going to be close to being in the same place, actually. It's going to be interesting, to say the least. The other game that interests me, the other team or game that interests me, of course the Argos do, of course, being the bookend in that, but the Ottawa Montreal game has me thinking, can Ottawa beat Montreal? If Ottawa can beat Montreal, boy, does the Eastern Division change drastically, because Ottawa winning let's say hey, sorry Argo fans, let's say Ottawa wins against Toronto and then wins against Montreal. Guess where they're at? This is a big week.
It's a
There's a lot that can change.
We're halfway to the season point, and these are the games that make or break the standings because of the East is so tight. Toronto, Hamilton have the same number of wins. They're at 4, but Montreal wins a game. Ottawa wins a couple. They're right in there.
Everybody's there.
It's no coincidence that the CFL gave the Argos 4 straight games against the East, and that the East are playing themselves right now because this is some smart scheduling because you can now kind of manipulate the playoff picture by having stacking
Yeah,
East versus
massage it
East
a
or
little
West
bit,
versus
right?
West. Give a little bit of a break later, break it up a little bit, and then bring it right back at the end.
Absolutely.
This is gonna be a marathon finish for a lot of these teams.
A great finish. I'll leave you with the final word. Again, next week, what are we going to talk about? Every week we talk about something, and then we come back and we find out, yeah, we should be talking about what's the surprise topic for you.
Well, McLeod Bethel Thompson starting again for the Argos. That's been confirmed, and I think I want to see if there's an upset somewhere along the lines here, or if
There's
there's
a lot of opportunities. Talked about Ottawa, Calgary, so and Edmonton's not playing.
yeah. So
So you
there's
got
gonna be some disappointment somewhere for sure.
yeah, no kidding. Well, David, thanks as usual. A lot to talk about. A fun season. We're in the home stretch now. It's going to be a great run to the end of the season.
Oh, it's going to be a great end to the season. I think this is what CFL fans miss the most.
Absolutely. Well, he's David Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk. Aaron live Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk, news and entertainment and other sports programming we offer, please check out spanglishworld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Till next time.